another episode of Have Your Say. Today in our studio at West TV, my guest is Kenneth Schultz. It's a German name, is it?
It is, yes. My ancestors were German, but they've been here a long time.
Here in Australia.
In Australia. They came originally to South Australia. They were some of the earliest settlers into South Australia.
That's good. So you are a real Aussie,
Yeah.
in a way of, as you can be.
Well, I'm about sixth generation.
Sixth generation.
Yeah.
Not as many as the indigenous people, but it's quite significant. Got a wonderful book, Western Civilization Under Siege. And today we try to find out one of the biggest threats of Western civilization, according to you and your book, is Islam.
Yes.
What we all know in the Western world about Islam, lately in the 21st century, since 9/11, is Islam terrorism, or in other words, jihad. So jihad is what the Islam religionist teaches to the followers. Your best way to conquer the world and make everyone following Islam is to fight and beat the people
Not
who
necessarily in
don't
the
want to be.
21st century. That's how they've done it for most of the 1400 years, but now they've got even smarter at it. And I say that there is a three-pronged attack from Islam on the Western world.
Such as?
Well, first, terrorism is the first prong of that attack, but they're not going to conquer us militarily. They're conquering us by making our leaders appease them. That seems to be the way leaders deal with brutal dictators or brutality or whatever, is they have this thing called appeasement.
The United States succeeded tremendously to not win the war. That's their biggest success in history, having wars and losing all of them.
Yeah.
A great achievement, by the way. Congratulations, United States. But where are we going with this war? What do you think?
We're not going anywhere, really. It's a distraction. And you can't, it's very hard to win a war against ideology, and that's what it is. And if you go to Afghanistan, say, to try and bring in democracy, you're wasting your time. It is a Muslim country, and even if you're there to help them, they still don't like the idea because you are an infidel in a Muslim country.
And you shouldn't tell us, Muslims, what we have to do.
Well,
so why the hell then the Western world try again and again through centuries to convince the Muslims what they're doing is not right, they have to live in a democratic society, and they have to change their mind. That's insane. I could not convince a believer of God to not believe in that God.
exactly right.
So how can I do that? So where is this great stupidity is coming from?
Stupidity is the only way that I can put it, but really the terrorism, as I said, is a softening up process for the other two prongs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the next one is infiltration. Now, that another branch of Islam, such as the Muslim Brotherhood, they're called modern Muslims. They've decided that another way to do it is infiltrate through society. So you get into government, you get into all the different groups, the cultures.
You have to be in a Western country for that.
Exactly.
To apply. But somehow you have to get into the Western country. And this is another duty of good Muslims, to migrate.
Exactly. Well, that's the third prong.
Why do we let them migrate into the Western society?
Well,
if it's that simple.
It's the stupidity of our authorities, our politicians.
But the Christians, the politicians, and even the Pope, they should be familiar with the other religions. And if they know their teaching, they couldn't just say, oh, yes, they teach that probably, but we don't need to know about this. And they're experiencing and they're engineering the immigration of Muslims, and also the engineering that with the wars, which we engineered. So we're happening in double front. Why are we doing that against us?
You use the word stupidity, and that's our authorities are acting in a stupid way. Got blinkered ideas, blinkered thoughts. They're not up to speed on what is going on. That's the problem. There's only one politician that is up to speed, and that's the Dutchman Geert Wilders. And he's the leader of the second most popular party in the Netherlands. And he is out there telling the world what is really going on. But the world, that is the leaders, don't want to know.
They're not listening.
Not listening. The invasion is the third prong that I spoke about.
Yes.
It's called al-Hijra. And al-Hijra means to immigrate. And that came from Muhammad himself. He said it's the duty of all Muslims to immigrate and move to other countries with the view of setting up an Islamic state. And just have a look how successful that is in Germany, France, and a lot of Western Europe. There's millions of so-called refugees that are now setting up their own mini Islamic states. They're called no-go areas where the police and authorities won't even go anymore. It's too dangerous. The Sharia law is set up and they're running their own little mini states.
The whole European election, which is just coming up in May in this year, it's all about that migration, Muslim migration. And what the European Union not done so far, and they couldn't agree on it, is that topic. And let's see what's happening in the election very soon. However, tell me something about the Sharia law.
Sharia law,
yes.
is an all-encompassing law. It was started after Muhammad, because after he died there was all sorts of fights and revolutions and one group fighting another group, and people were dropping out. And the leaders of the day decided, hey, we need to codify all this and make a law that we can hold people together. And that's where Sharia law came from, after the death of Muhammad. And it's a complete law that governs Muslims.
Is it happened because, not because just Muhammad died, but he died before he really finished and completed the Quran?
Yes, he didn't, and there's a lot of controversy about the Quran, when it was done and so on. So his job was incomplete, and it started to fall apart after his death. So they brought in Sharia law to try and bind the people together and bring in brutal punishment for people who stepped outside of Sharia law. Sharia law governs the life of Muslims from cradle to grave. It's not just religious doctrine, it is how you deal with family, money, health, food. Every aspect of a Muslim's life is governed by Sharia law. And
is it bad for the Muslims, or is it bad for the Westerners? Or so what's the problem with the Sharia law?
Sharia law is not good for Muslims at all. It binds them so tightly that they can't really think for themselves anymore. They have to just do what they're told to do. And it was a totalitarian system, basically. And that is the ultimate aim of Islam.
But how does it endangering the Western world?
Well,
Sharia law. Apart from knowing that they aim to get everyone converted into Islam and then let them live under Sharia law. But how does it really threatening the West?
Well, who wants to live under a totalitarian regime? Honestly,
probably
it's self-evident.
Probably not too many people. That's why I couldn't see the threat. If we logically don't wish to live under that law, we're not gonna submit ourselves to that.
Well, I wouldn't agree with that. I think that too many people are submitting little by little. Our authorities, our police, our
Tell me some example then.
Well,
from your book, of course.
Yeah. Oh well, even recently, you now see police and authorities helping Islam to the detriment of their own people. A recent example was the Canadian publisher and author Lauren Southern. She came to Australia a few months ago.
Yes.
She wanted to go down to Lakemba and take some video of the mosque there. She never got as far as the mosque. A mob of police intercepted her and said, "You cannot go there." A senior police inspector said, "I don't want you going anywhere near that mosque. You may offend them. And if you keep going, I might have to arrest you because you may be committing a breach of the peace." So
You're serious?
It's serious. It was written up in the papers. And they even named the inspector, a senior, not some constable, an inspector. You're not going near that mosque because you may offend them. So can you see what's happening is that they're getting the influences coming in, and our authorities, our police, politicians are already starting to submit. And Islam means submission. And people who submit are called dhimmis. And that really means a second-class citizen who is now beholden to Islam. He's not a Muslim, but he's beholden to them, submitting to them. And do you want to do that?
I don't want to be a dhimmi or a dummy either, none of those. But I just, as I said, if this is all so evident, if this is all so evident through your book and through real life, then, as I said, I very hardly see the threat, because our society is, or the people who are living in our society, probably a better way to say, not prepared to give their life to live under Sharia law, except if that is better than our written law. Is it better or worse?
Absolutely not. Our laws are built out of past history of the law and from legislation. Sharia law is an immutable law from the 7th century. And it's got some weird and wonderful things. Do you want that, or do you want law that the politicians make and the judges pick up from the past through precedent? I think there's not much choice between them.
Ken, it's a good question, but before we got some answer for that question, we have to go to a short break. But stay with us, because we're coming back after the break to discuss more deep things about the Islamic threat on our Western society.